It's time for my favorite video of the year, the one where you, the viewers, tell me what to build and test. It's also the time when I take no responsibility for how good or how bad this turns out. So let's cross our fingers and dive into the Viewer's Choice PC 2022. If you guys aren't familiar with this video series, every year around this time, I run a series of polls on Twitter asking you guys out there in YouTube land what your preferred hardware is from this past year. If you want to be a part of it in the future, make sure to follow me over there and consider getting subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. In most of my build videos, I go over my parts choices and the reason why they may fit any particular use case, but here I'll defer to the poll results for how we arrived at this pile of parts sitting on the table in front of me. The first question I posed was pretty general and had to do with the price tier that we would be targeting. By a fairly wide margin, you guys told me that your biggest interest this year was in mid-range hardware. This doesn't surprise me, as while high-end hardware is certainly interesting and, to be honest, it's pretty fun to play with, it's not necessarily attainable for a lot of people. A nice, robust mid-range PC build can be had for reasonable money and will last years, and that's what we'll be building here today. The next question was by far the closest result that we had this year. I asked for our mid-range build what processor fit the best, and you guys almost couldn't decide between the Intel i5-13600K and the AMD Ryzen 5 7600X. I also offered the option of an older processor, as some great deals can be had on 12th gen Intel and AM4 chips, but ultimately the 6-core 12-thread Ryzen 7600X won out, and this will be the first actual system that I get to put together using it. Up next was our choice of GPU, and you guys spoke loud and clear that you wanted an all AMD build this year, as the RX 6700 XT beat out two options from Nvidia and even the new Intel A770. I'll be honest, I was kind of hoping that we could see what the A770 could do in a mid-range system, but it finished a distant third here. Considering that we're going to very soon be talking about the next generation of AMD graphics cards, this might be the last real opportunity to use RDNA 2 in any significant capacity. This is the Power Color Red Devil version of the 6700 XT, and it'll work great here. Considering the increased cost of motherboards for both this generation of AMD AM5 and Intel Z790, I wanted to make sure that we were at least moderately reasonable here, so I went for a selection of B650 and low-end X670 boards. The MSI Tomahawk name carries some goodwill forward ever since the excellent B450 Tomahawk, and this latest iteration sports a good suite of features along with simple good looks and an all-black aesthetic. It is unfortunate that mid-range motherboards now cost $260, and I hope that as AM5 matures, we see prices come down a bit, making them at least a little more accessible to more people. We then needed to decide how to cool our processor. The 7000 series of chips no longer come with a cooler, even the 6-core model like we're using right now, and they are known to run pretty hot at times, although that is by design. Luckily, the 7600X doesn't suck up quite as much power as the more expensive higher core count models, and a nice tower air cooler should do the trick. Luckily, you guys agreed, and I'm glad we aren't at the point yet where we need to stick an AIO onto everything. This is the Be Quiet Pure Rock 2 FX. It can handle up to 150 watts and comes in an all-black finish with an RGB fan. It should be perfect here. One thing that I didn't poll the Twitterverse about was memory, and that's because the baseline for most DDR5 kits is 32 gigabytes, so two 16 gigabyte sticks. Yes, you can find kits of 8, but seeing as we're not going for a budget build, I don't mind bumping up the specs of something that you can potentially reuse in the future. So this is Corsair's Vengeance RGB DDR5 6000 memory with AMD Expo, which is essentially XMP, but for Team Red. It'll look great and run fast, and that's all that matters. Now for the case. There are just too many choices on the market to narrow them all down into a poll with a maximum of 4 choices. So instead I hit you with a few price categories that might fit into a budget or mid-range build. I agree with what came out on top, and so did 66% of you. $80 to $110 gets you a lot of case these days, so once we locked in the price tier, I picked this guy. It's from Montech, and it's called the Sky 2. Montech sent this over, and although I have very little experience with the brand, the Sky 2 actually has impressed me so far with what I've seen. They've taken the standard rectangle and made it a bit different, borrowing the glass front and side intake look from Lian Li and combining it with 4 included fans, a fan and RGB controller, and a pretty slick look overall. I'm excited to build in here and see what $100 buys you. I then followed up by asking how much power you guys think we need in our mid-range build. I was a bit surprised to see 750 watts win out here, as I kind of expected 650 to be the top answer, but this does make sense. Not only will 750 watts work well, but given that new hardware seems to be consuming more power with each generation, 750 will give us some nice upgrade headroom for the future. This is the Pure Power 11 FM from Be Quiet. It's 80 plus gold rated with fully modular black cables and also has a fairly small footprint. I'm going to skip a poll question here and go back to it in a second because I have one that directly applies to the power supply. I asked if you guys wanted some custom cables in here, and I think you wisely said no. When we're targeting a mid-range system that gives you the best performance per dollar, it might not be the best decision to spend $50, $100, or more dollars on a set of cables when we just use the ones that are included instead. We will need storage, however, and I think it's pretty standard in almost every system build these days to consider using an M.2 NVMe SSD. If you haven't tried booting off of one of these bad boys, you're really doing yourself a disservice. You wanted 1 terabyte of storage in the system, and I think that is a good number. It'll hold Windows, several games, and have plenty of space left over for photos or videos or other programs. This is the Lexar NM800 Pro, and at $100 for a Gen 4 drive, it is a good value for blazing fast storage. Yes, there are cheaper 1 terabyte drives out there, so if you wanted to trim 20 or 30 bucks off of this build, you could probably do so here pretty easily. And the last question that I hit you guys with was in regards to the cooling setup in the case. The Sky 2 comes with 4 fans already, which is more than most. But I wanted to know if we should either add more fans, replace all of these with something like the Be Quiet Lightwings, or just leave things as they are. Again, I think you made the right decision here for a mid-range build, as we are sticking with the stock fan configuration. 4 fans in this build should be plenty of airflow, and we'll put that to the test, let's just say right now. right. You guys did good. This thing came out so much better than I actually even thought that it would. I am so impressed by a lot of different aspects of this build, and I definitely want to talk about the build experience itself, and we're going to get to some performance numbers because I tested a few games, and this thing is definitely a gaming monster. All right, so first of all, let's talk about this case, this Montech Sky 2. Again, like I said in the intro, I'm not intimately familiar with Montech as a brand or with the Sky series of cases, but the white version here is $110 and the black version of the same exact case is $100. They had a $10 premium for the white paint, which is pretty standard here, I think. But the case itself is actually pretty excellent. Not only does it have really cool visuals from the front and from the side because of the wraparound glass, but the airflow in here is good. The build process was very streamlined. It has a lot of really nice touches and features. The cable management in the back started out looking like this. That's the way that it comes from the factory. And then once I populated it with gear, this is what it ended up looking like with a very small amount of cable management effort on my part. So yes, it probably could have been a little neater, but I don't know that it necessarily needed to be because the side panel or the back panel closed without any issue at all. And I think things look pretty neat. Also, we have this integrated RGB and fan controller. So that meant that all I needed to do was plug a single cable for RGB and a single cable for PWM into the motherboard, and then everything else got routed to the controller. I didn't have to worry about tidying up all these RGB and fan control lines. This is another really cool feature. Something else that I don't even really think that I bothered to notice was that the fans on the back wall of the case are actually inset into the motherboard tray. So that means that if you have an extra wide motherboard and for some reason it has to overhang the fans, it can do that. There is room there for that to happen. There's plenty of space up top above the motherboard. If you wanted to have a top mounted radiator, it would not interfere with either the VRM heatsink or the memory, which is an issue in a lot of cases. So yeah, for $100 or $110 for the white version, I think the Sky 2 is a really good choice. And I'm glad I went with it for this build. That brings us to what kind of temperatures we got out of this setup, including the 4 fans as originally included with the case. So here's a chart including ambient temperature, GPU temperature, and CPU temperature. And this was taken while playing Cyberpunk for about 10 minutes. The GPU got up to 65 degrees, the CPU got up to 77 degrees, and they had pretty much leveled out by that point. These are both perfectly adequate numbers. With an AIO or a larger air cooler, we might see CPU temperatures be lower, especially while gaming and you don't have an extreme load on the CPU. However, I'm perfectly happy with 77, and I think that in a normal scenario, you would not really have any issues with the 7600X running at that temperature. I also tested 5 different games at all 3 standard resolutions. So that's 1080p, 1440p, and 2160p or 4K. Now I know the 6700 XT is not necessarily supposed to be a 4K gaming card, but might as well give it a try and see how it performs. So first of all, Cyberpunk, we saw 111.91 FPS or 112 FPS at 1080p, which is more than playable in this game. 71 FPS at 1440p and 32 at 4K. So yes, it does struggle at 4K. Keep in mind, with Cyberpunk, because it is so graphically intense, I did enable AMD's FSR technology running at the quality preset. So honestly, there wasn't a huge loss in visual fidelity here at all, and the game played really well and really smoothly at both 1080p and 1440p, which I think this is supposed to be targeted at anyway. I don't think this is a 4K gaming box. We're gonna move on though to Far Cry 6. We saw good frame rates at ultra settings across the board here, and with a little bit of tweaking, I think we could probably get a playable 4K frame rate as we were at 53 FPS with the ultra preset. Obviously 1080p and 1440p were significantly higher, and I think that you can honestly play Far Cry 6 at any resolution. F122 was played on the high preset, and we saw incredibly high frame rates at 1080p and 1440p, with 4K frame rates also breaking 90 FPS up to 96. This, again, is a very playable game at any resolution here at the high preset. Now, F122 does also have some ray tracing features, but we didn't enable ray tracing for any of these tests. I don't think this is the kind of system that really would benefit from that kind of thing, even if you get a few extra graphical tweaks. I think that the hit to frame rate and the hit to performance would just be too great. I don't think we want to be enabling ray tracing here. Let's talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 next. We saw 95 FPS at 1080p, and obviously we stepped down from there, 1440p and 4K. You could definitely play Red Dead at 1440p here. 4K is probably stretching it. I don't think this is quite the system for that, but definitely a really good experience at 1440p, and this was at the Ultra preset. And then also I tested Borderlands 3. Again, there's no ray tracing features enabled in any of these games, so Borderlands is just pure rasterization performance. We saw 131 FPS at 1080p, 91 FPS at 1440p, and 47 FPS at 4K. With the Ultra preset, again, 4K probably not where you want to be, but this system is proving to be an excellent 1440p gaming box. So, what do you guys think? I love it. This system came out great. You guys made awesome choices, and I'm glad that we were able to do another Viewer's Choice PC in 2022. I think next year we might look a little bit different, but who knows? I guess we'll see what kind of hardware comes out between now and then, but I definitely plan on doing another one of these for 2023. So if you don't want to miss it, make sure that you get subscribed to the channel and also follow me on Twitter over at BPS Customs. Thank you so much, guys, for everything in 2022. I know this year is not quite over yet, but this build kind of puts a wrap on things for the year. And I just wanted to say thank you for watching and commenting and engaging with me over the course of the last 12 months. I did take a little bit of a break there in the summer. I needed it to kind of recharge and reset, but we're back in full force. We got a bunch of videos coming up soon. We got new AMD graphics cards coming and CES 2023 happening in just like 3 weeks from now. So that's nuts. Thank you so much again, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the Viewer's Choice PC 2022. I'll see you next time.